and welcome to episode number 22 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And this is our second to last episode before the season begins. We're finally getting closer to actually seeing these teams in action that we've talked so much about.
Yeah, I'm excited. Sun's out here. Cam and I both drinking some beers while we record here, so listen to all of our drunk takes.
Could get spicy.
Yeah, very spicy. No, we're not actually drunk, but we are excited to talk some baseball.
Yeah, I wish it was sunny where I am, but yeah, I'm excited too. And let's start off with, I guess, the biggest league news of the past week. As of the time we're recording, it was 9 days ago, but we haven't published an episode since it happened. But Andrew traded Chris Sale away. He traded Sale as well as Nomar Mazara to Ruthvik and Nick in exchange for Anthony Santander, Kevin Gausman, and Kyle Wright. What do you think about this trade, Sahil?
Well, let's first mention that they, 3 minutes later, decided to swap Kyle Wright and Nomar Mazara back, with Ruthvik also sending a 2023 second Andrew's way. So the trade is really Chris Sale for Anthony Santander, Kevin Gausman, and a 2023 second round pick. Of course, they just wanted to mess with me for the whole Kyle Wright for Nomar Mazara stuff I was posting in the chat. And I enjoyed the 3 minutes of being excited that Nomar Mazara was finally off Andrew's roster, but I digress. But with respect to the deal itself, I think Andrew had the right idea where he was like, I'm going to sell Chris Sale. Chris Sale is 32 right now. He doesn't fit into his timeline of contention. He turns 32 in 12 days. And he's going to be 33 in his first full season back from surgery, because he's not going to start the season healthy. So from Andrew's perspective, I get wanting to move him. I would have understood if he wanted to wait until Sale was healthy and pitching again to move him. But I also get just not taking a risk in taking a package now. The problem I have is I don't necessarily know if this is the right package. I'm an Orioles fan, obviously, so I like Santander. I've never been that high on him. I think he's a solid player. He feels to me like Eddie Rosario light. He had a 315 OBP in 2020 in 37 games, which was not even that great. It's like a little below average. The WRC plus was great. It was 132. He did hit 11 homers in 165 plate appearances. So if you're going to prorate this out to a full season, and maybe you think he can hit 30 plus homers, maybe 35 homers with a 320 OBP, that has some value. But I don't know if the upside there is that high. If you're looking at Santander's previous seasons in 2019, he had a 297 OBP. And the 20 homers was nice, and he did it in 405 plate appearances. But that OBP is just not going to cut it in our league. So I am a little concerned about him. I mean, I think he'll be solid in real life. I just don't know if he's going to be a great fantasy asset given our format or anything particularly special. I mean, I'm not talking like he's waiver wire fodder, right? But I feel like guys who can hit for power with low OBPs are definitely out there. I.e., CJ Cron was sitting out in free agency for a hot second. I know Eric has him now, and made the mistake of picking him up thinking he was a free agent, but you get my point. And Kevin Gausman, again, Orioles fan, so soft spot for Gausman, but he's 30, so he doesn't really fit Andrew's rebuild. I guess Andrew has to determine if he's legit or not based on the 60-inning sample he had in 2020. I think obviously Andrew is pretty high on him. And if he could keep it up, I think Andrew could flip him for a lot higher price. I just don't know if I want to be the one taking that gamble on Kevin Gausman. And maybe I'm just a little scarred from being an Orioles fan. But I don't know if I look at these 60 innings. I mean, it did come with a spike in a strikeout rate, which was nice. But I don't know if I look at those innings and can definitively say he's figured it out. After 7 years of not putting up the best numbers. And maybe this is just the type of package we should have expected with Sale coming off of Tommy John. But I don't know. I thought he could have done a little better. What did you think, Cam?
Yeah, I'll start with a fun fact. In 2018, I traded Kevin Gosman to Anthony for the pick that would eventually become Jared Kelenic. So
Okay.
Gosman's always kind of got a Dan Straley-esque soft spot in my heart, especially since, and if you go back even further, I traded Bo Burrows for Gosman. Burrows is even worse. So there's something there. Maybe he can flip Gosman, like you said, for something good. But yeah, I agree. I even like this return a little less than you do. I think Chris Sale is a huge name, if nothing else. He's got the talent, and I think it felt a little rushed, like he was trading him too soon, or he
Yep.
was, yeah, hurrying to trade him when, especially since he's hurt, he can just stash him on the injured list. I think it is the right move to trade him, but he rushed it a little bit. And yeah, like you said, Santander is nothing special. Gosman, he seemed to be good this year, and maybe Andrew's a little higher on him. And honestly, Kyle Wright would have been the most interesting piece if he did get him. Not that I like Kyle Wright that much, but he's a young starting pitcher who has some degree of upside, and that's what Andrew should be going after. So, but he didn't get Kyle Wright in the deal. It was just a ruse. But yeah, I think he should have held off on this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the value he got is maybe a little bit better than you give it credit for, but I think that you're right. The Kyle Wright was the type of player that he needed to get in return for Chris Sale, not a 30-year-old starting pitcher in Gosman. However, maybe it's just me as someone who likes to make a lot of trades and just thinks of every player as having like values. Gosman might have a lot of value to somebody in May or June or July if he does well again, and then he could flip him and get some of those prospects that he needs. So this might just be a means to an end. And that sense, I'm okay with it. But I think you're right. Sale does have the name value and perhaps could have gotten a bit more. One last thing I will say, Dan Straley and soft spot, just no. That's
I love him.
I try to forget that the Dan Straley era of the Orioles ever existed. I'm still scarred by our Gallardo Award winning.
All right, I'll say Alfredo Simon. How about that?
Yeah, that's better. I think it's a name we both like.
One more thing on this: if Andrew's serious about rebuilding, he shouldn't be making teams, or he shouldn't be making trades with the worst farm system in the league. He should be reaching out to someone like Connor, say, who's got a great farm system but is looking to acquire top guys.
Yeah, you would think that Chris Sale would be the type of guy Connor would want, especially given that he just acquired Roberto Osuna, which is a trade we'll get into in a second, where we know Osuna is not going to start the season healthy. That seems like a good fit for Connor. And I think, I wonder if shopping around Sale a little more might have yielded a better offer. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I don't know if I would have had the assets to give, to get Sale, or the assets that I was willing to give up that Andrew would have wanted. But I know that there's definitely other winning teams who I think would have been interested in bidding. I'm sure you would have. I'm sure EBO would have. So.
Yeah, I think EBO is a sneaky good fit. They've got the prospects if Andrew had demanded more. And if he just sits on their injured list, much like Justin Verlander, he can sit there, kind of slowly regain value as he gets closer to recovering, and then they'll decide whether or not they want to continue with the reliever strategy. If they don't, they trade Sale for something better than what they gave up for him, and if they decide to abandon the strategy, then they've got Chris Sale. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. It's tough, but I think regardless, I still think this trade could work out for Andrew. I'm not ready to call it a big loss, but one thing I did want to do is talk about this briefly from Ruthvik's and Nick's perspective. I mean, I think that you and I have talked on this podcast about how Ruthvik has just so many starters. In fact, my New Year's resolution for them was that they need to cut down on a couple of these starters because otherwise they're going to have a serious logjam. I think the fact that they could stash Sale in the IR to start the season helps alleviate a little bit of that logjam. which is going to be useful for them. It'll give them some more time to evaluate some of their starting pitchers. But also because they have all these starting pitchers, Gosman was just one of many comparable guys, but Sale has an upside where if he comes back healthy, I mean, and is pitching just as well as he did before. I mean, you're talking DeGrom, Bieber, Sale, Gallen. I mean, if Lamet could keep it up, him as a number 5, that's an elite top of the rotation. Like that's hard to beat. I mean, you and I have good rotations, but like even then, like we'd have a hard time beating DeGrom, Bieber, Sale, Gallen, and Lamet.
Yeah, that's rarely hard to beat. I agree.
Yeah, we'll see. But you want to move on to our next trade here?
Yeah, what's the next one you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of teed it up a bit, so let's talk about the Roberto Osuna trade. EBO sent Roberto Osuna to Connor for EBO's 2023 second with a condition. If Osuna is signed to a team and plays in the major leagues before the All-Star break, Connor will send his 2025 third-round pick to EBO. I don't think that condition is going to vest. Like, I think Osuna is going to be out a little while longer because he had his surgery in probably August. I can't imagine he's back before the All-Star break. But what are your thoughts on this trade? I'll let you go first this time.
I don't know why Connor made this deal, if we're being honest. He gave up a second rounder for basically the hope that that some team would decide to sign Osuna and pitch him by the All-Star break, which, I mean, isn't even a ton of time. I don't know. And now he has to stash him on the roster. He doesn't get to go in the IL slot or anything. He's on Connor's bench for at least the next 3 months. And it felt a little weird to me. I know you disagree that the conditional pick was a bad pick and the regular pick was a good pick, because I feel like if the expectation is that Osuna isn't going to play, then you'd offload him or you'd trade for him as cheap as possible, with, like, I guess the surprise being him playing, meaning that there would be a lot of value in him playing, I guess. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're making sense. My counter argument to that then would be that kind of destroys the incentive for the trade, because if you're making a small trade now with the expectation that you could have to pay full price if the best case scenario happens, then that's no fun for you, because your goal, if you're Connor here, is to hypothetically buy low on the player. And then just to sweeten the deal just a little bit for EBO, you give them the extra lower pick just to make him feel a little better if Osuna comes back. But otherwise, what's happening is you're taking away all the risk for EBO, because if Osuna sucks or he doesn't come back, fine, they basically gave him up and they got like a very cheap asset, like whatever, that's still better than nothing. But if he breaks out and he does really well and they're getting that pick, then, they've gotten the appropriate value. It would be like EBO's getting the best of both worlds, and then Connor's getting, he's not getting an opportunity to extract more value than he gave up in the deal. So I think that the structure makes sense. But I do think that you're right. Now, I don't think this deal makes that much sense for Connor for all the reasons you stated. He can't stash him on the IR because he's not signed with the team. Now, maybe he eventually signs with the team and they're able to stash him on the IR that way. But my guess is the way it would work out is that they'd sign him to a minor league deal, and then he wouldn't be able to be put on the IL. I'm not sure what that scenario looks like for ESPN, but it just seems curious. And this is also someone EBO picked up off of free agency. He was sitting there in free agency for a while. My guess is EBO just would have dropped him had they not been able to find a trade before the season, because EBO can't really afford to roster him. They need to have every healthy reliever they can. And then at that point, you just have to win the waiver battle. The one thing this does potentially tell me about Connor's team, though, is that maybe this year isn't the year that he's gunning to start competing. I know we've talked about this offseason, how he started to build up his team, acquiring, players like Jose Barrios, for example. But maybe this is more of a sign that he views next year as a year to compete, and he thinks that Osuna will be back for a full season then and closing for a team, which could happen. That could be conceivable. And if Connor is willing to concede that this year is going to be definitely better than the first few years, but not quite a competing year, then, I think that that's fair. He could waste this roster spot on Osuna for now, but if that's not the case, if he's trying to compete now, then I think you've hit the nail in the coffin. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. Maybe it does signal that Connor is just kind of trying to play the middle ground and see what happens. And yeah, a couple other trades were made this week. Oswald Peraza was traded from Clayton and Jake to Daniel and Alex for their 2023 second. Not much to say about that one, other than probably fair value for a guy who's borderline top 100 prospect on a couple lists for.
I think he did crack the Fangraphs top 100.
He did, and then other lists he's a little lower.
Yeah.
For a pick that's roughly that value. But the other trade, Clayton and Jake trade Ryan Yarbrough to Andrew for Eric's 2023 second and Adam Ottavino. And I know, Sahil, you had some opinions about this deal.
Yeah, before I get into that, I'd just like to say it's nice to see a trade go down between two teams that haven't really made too many deals together in Clayton and Jake and Alex and Daniel. So always nice to see that. Seeing some different trade partnerships here in March. But yeah, with respect to the Yarbrough trade, I mean, I'm a big Ryan Yarbrough fan. I mean, he kind of gives me nobody is Kyle Hendricks, but like he kind of is built in that Kyle Hendricks mold. When you look at, he doesn't have the highest strikeout rate, but he has very, very good control. I mean, he had a 1.27 walk rate in 2019. That's fantastic. It was at 194 in 2020. He had a 355 FIP in 2019 and a 380 FIP in 2020. And I think that his role is going to be even a little more expanded. I know that they've been using him more as an opener, as the bulk pitcher following an opener in previous seasons. But with Snell not there, with Morton not there, with Glasnow kind of the only starter they have right now that's kind of established and like dependable. And even then, you could argue that Glasnow's not really that dependable, because I don't even think he's pitched more than like 60 innings in a season for the Rays yet, because of the injuries in 2020, the issues there. He had 16 2/3 in 2019 and 57 1/3 in 2020. So I think that Yarbrough is going to be more of a traditional starter. I think they're going to give him the ball every fifth day. I think and just let him start the game, not use him as a bulk pitcher. I mean, you saw that even a little more this year. He started 9 of his 11 games. And while I don't think the upside's particularly high, I think he can, help stabilize ratios at the back of the rotation and be an arm that is just really dependable for a team. And I know that the Rays are going to put him in the best position to succeed with all the analytics, and, they'll figure all of that out. So I like him a lot. I'm not saying he's a fantasy star. I'm not saying that like Jake and Clayton are screwed for giving him up or anything, but he's a guy I really like. And I don't think Andrew gave up a lot to get him. I mean, Eric's 2023 seconds probably going to be late in the round. Like, I don't view that as a huge deal. And Adam Ottavino is not going to be the closer to start the season for the Red Sox. He's coming off a really bad season with the Yankees. Now, that doesn't mean he can't bounce back or eventually take the closer's role from Matt Barnes, because I don't think Matt Barnes is all that great either. But, like, he's kind of irrelevant to this deal. And I know Clayton and Jake don't seem to be as high in Ryan Yarbrough than I am, but I think they could have gotten better value for him. And for Andrew, I know the Yarbrough is a little older, but I think that kind of the same thing I talked about with Gosman. Maybe he's able to flip Yarbrough for a better price. And I think these are the small things that you have to do while you're, rebuilding. Take advantage of every opportunity that comes up, even if you're not getting a top prospect in the deal. If you could do something that can help net you a prospect, or help eventually net you a better draft pick or whatever, you should do it.
I think Andrew did well here. And I hate to keep pitching players to EBO, but you think Ryan Yarbrough would be a good fit there? He's a guy, he's not going to get quality starts, but as their 1 or 2 starters to put on the roster, I think Yarbrough's as good a guy as any to put there in the lineup and hope that maybe he's not going to hurt the ERA, but maybe he can flip strikeouts in a week where they're kind of tight with another team, and that could be crucial if they, with their reliever strategy.
Yeah, two quick things I'll say to that. One, they just picked up Jake Odorizzi today, who I think they'll probably just stash in the IL eventually, because I don't think Odorizzi is going to start the season with the team because of his late start to spring training. Or they'll cut him if that doesn't make him IL eligible again. I don't know how ESPN operates, but it's clear that they are looking for another guy or two just to fill out the back of that rotation. And second, I think Yarbrough would be great. And I think he would be more particularly interesting to them if the Rays decide to use him a little more as that bulk pitcher and not just as a starter, because not that the starting limits, are really important to them because they're not going to hit it. But if he does serve as a bulk reliever, I mean, that gives them some of that innings to hit 20 that they need for their ratios to count each week. And, kind of using him in more of a traditional, maybe opener, reliever role might, maybe yield some better results for them. So I think you're right. I think he's the type of pitcher they should have gone after. And given the assets they have, it wouldn't cost a lot to get him. I'd rather have, your Yarbrough than Odorizzi.
I agree. And yeah, Yarbrough could certainly help them hit that innings limit without, if it is a thin week, so they don't have to maybe stream a couple extra relievers, and that could help them avoid a catastrophe like they did when they streamed. Was it Richard Rodriguez? No, it might have been Jeff Hartlieb.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you what team Jeff Hartlieb plays for.
I know it was a Pirates reliever last year. I'm not sure if Jeff Hartlieb is still on the Pirates. But yeah, I'm almost positive that that's who it was that cost them. But yeah, they want to do their best to avoid being put in that situation again.
Absolutely, yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
All right. Do you want to explain what our main segment is today?
Yeah. So this was an idea I came up with a little while ago that I thought would be fun to do at the end of the off season. We have made, to date this offseason, 93 trades, or 29% of the trades that have occurred in league history. That number is insane. I don't have to tell you how crazy that number is. I think even the most dedicated leagues have not made 93 trades this offseason. So what we're going to do today is compare some of the players at each position who were traded and see who we think the better fit is going to be for this season. So we're going to go position by position. We have 12 comparisons here, and do we want to get started with our catcher comparison, Cam?
Yeah, let's do it. Which catchers are we going to compare?
Yeah, we're going to compare Sean Murphy and Wilson Contreras. Which catcher do you think is going to have the better season and was a better acquisition for their team? I acquired Sean Murphy from Alex. I know he's been traded around a couple other times this offseason, and Wilson Contreras came to EBO from Alex. So a busy catcher trading offseason for Alex and Zach.
This is a tough one. I famously gave Wilson Contreras a vote for Catcher of the Year in our season end awards. So I'm incredibly high on him. I think for a single season, EBO getting him was the better move, just because who was their old catcher?
They had Darno last year, and then they traded him to Connor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Darno isn't the most reliable. Whereas you had Gary Sanchez, who isn't exactly reliable either, but he's kind of got a high ceiling. He's a guy who has done well before, and I think Contreras is a little bit better right now. So, especially since a lot of catchers seem to bounce around the league quite a bit. Teams haven't really stuck with one catcher for a while, except I guess Yuki with Real Muto, but. Yeah, I think Murphy's going to be the better dynasty asset, but just looking at who's going to be more impactful this year, I got to say Wilson Contreras.
All right. Well, I'll argue to the contrary here. I'm going to throw out some stats for you, and we're going to play a little guessing game here. One of these players had a 364 OBP, and one of them had a 356 OBP. Who do you think had the higher OBP?
Well, I'm gonna guess Murphy had the higher OBP because you're arguing in favor of him instead of Contreras.
Yeah, so then I won't go through the whole thing, but Wilson Contreras had a 110 WRC plus. Do you want to guess what Sean Murphy's was?
Well, I have his baseball reference page up, so.
All right. Well, 132 according to Fangraphs. They both hit 7 home runs, despite the fact that Contreras had 85 more plate appearances, 12 less RBIs for Sean Murphy, and I think he will bat lower in the lineup. So I don't know if all the RBI opportunities will be there, but that is a pretty deep lineup. I think Sean Murphy's due for a breakout year, and he's someone I've always been really high on. I mean, to give you all a comparison to another recently graduated catcher, I mean, he had a higher FV on Fangraphs and a higher hit tool on Fangraphs than Will Smith. And we all know this type of season that Will Smith had. I mean, I think Sean Murphy could easily finish as a top 5 dynasty catcher this year. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit. I do think Wilson Contreras is admittedly the safer pick. And I do have a little bit of concerns with the fact that Sean Murphy had the lung issue and he's just now playing in games. And maybe he starts off April a little slow as he gets, kind of back into game shape completely. Although I do expect him to start the season on the opening day roster. But I'm really high on Murphy. And I think, I don't know about you, but I personally think that Sean Murphy is a top 5 dynasty catcher. Maybe he's not as good as Contreras this year, but I think as a dynasty catcher, I think he's a top 5 asset up there with Will Smith, Adley Rutschman, and Joey Bart, and JT Realmuto. I think those 4 plus Murphy would be my top 5 as of right now. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I mean, I guess, yeah, they're definitely top 5. I'd even put Contreras in the top 5. He's only, 28? But
he will turn 29 in May. So yeah, he's only 28.
But yeah, I think they're both in the top 5. With Murphy being that much younger, he's the better dynasty asset, I would say. But yeah, they're an interesting comparison, that's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think for the record, I think they'll both have good seasons, and I think EBO has a very good catcher, and I have a very good catcher. So let's move on to first base here. Luke Voit and Rhys Hoskins. Luke Voit is on, I want to say Eric's team, right? Yeah, let's double check that quickly. Luke Voit is on Eric's team, one of the few established players Eric has, and Rhys Hoskins. Actually, I don't even remember because he's been traded so many times this offseason. That's the beauty of making 93 trades. I feel like we forget whose roster players are on. He's on EBO's roster. I knew EBO had him at one point. Didn't know they still had him. Which player are you taking?
I think I'd be taking Luke Voit.
Yeah.
And I think my answer would have been different last year, but it seems it's looking more and more like Hoskins was just a flash in the pan. And Voit was, oh my God, he was so good last year. Let me pull up his Fangraphs page, but
I could be wrong, but I think he led the league in homers last year. In the 56 games he played, he had 22 home runs.
Yeah, you're right. He did. Yeah, he is 30, so he's definitely older. But yeah, 22 homers, that is massive for Eric, especially since he doesn't have a ton of power elsewhere, unless you think Cole Calhoun has power.
And then Cole Calhoun is an elite fantasy asset. He is integral to Eric's team. He's made that abundantly clear.
Yeah, Voit was good though. I'm wondering, the on-base percentage isn't amazing, and I'm wondering if that means he's potentially available. But yeah, he's a guy who broke out very late, but he's been so good ever since he got up to the majors, and I would rather have him than Hoskins.
I think I agree. Quick aside before I get into that, while we were talking about Cole Calhoun, loving this bet I made with Eric, over under 26.5 home runs that Cole Calhoun have when you take whatever number or whatever home run numbers that he has and prorate it out to 162 games since he's going to start the season hurt. Eric listened to our last podcast shitting on Cole Calhoun and decided he wanted to make a bet with me. So can't wait to see how that one turns out. But with respect to Voit and Hoskins, I mean, I think Voigt's probably the better option here. I will say with Voit, he does have quite an injury history, and that's a bit concerning, although Hoskins is just now getting into the swing of things with spring training because he had some injury issues. I don't think anybody thought he would start the season healthy. He had Tommy John, but it looks like he might have the chance to start on opening day, so good for him. Your point about the OBP is pretty valid because Hoskins had a 384 OBP in 2020, and Voit had a 338 OBP. Now, Voit in the last two seasons, 398 and 378, although a kind of highish BABIP, so 365 and a 345. That plummeted to 268 this year. So perhaps there's some rebounding that could come there. But what concerns me is it wasn't just like a BABIP field kind of drop in OBP. His walk rate almost dropped in half. It was 13.9 in 2019. It was 7.3 in 2020. Now, perhaps he sold out more for power because he had 22 homers in 56 games compared to the year before. In 118 games, he had fewer home runs. He only had 21. So I think I'd gladly take the 40-point drop in OBP if that meant that, he was going to hit at this ridiculous home run pace. I mean, he's obviously not going to hit 60 homers, but I think he could hop back up to a 350, 360-ish OBP with 30 homers. I think that's reasonable. And yeah, one other thing is, I kind of disagree with your characterization of Rhys Hoskins. I don't think he's washed up at all. He had a 140 WRC plus in 2020. He had 10 homers in 41 games, 185 plate appearances, 15.7% walk rate. That's great. I don't think Rhys Hoskins is ever going to be the slugger we thought he'd be in 2017 when he had the 158 WRC plus and an OBP that was almost 400. But I still think he's a very solid player with perhaps a little bit of upside because, he's still 28. And, I think he might be a little safer bet in the long term. But I think Voit, I think you're right, is probably the better bet for next season.
Yeah, I would say so. Moving on to second base, a lot of different players, interesting second basemen were acquired. The EBO acquired DJ LeMahieu from Yuki. Eric acquired Whit Merrifield from EBO. Ozzy Albies was traded to Andrew's team from Connor.
And he was once a member of EBO too, so all of these players have EBO connections.
Yeah, interesting for sure. But yeah, who do you think is going to be the most impactful this year?
Can I just say, we talked about 8 players, and I'm pretty sure all 8 of these players have been on EBO's roster at some point. I'm not 100% sure about Voit, but of these players for this year, I mean, I think the easy pick is just DJ LeMahieu. These are the consensus top 3 fantasy second basemen, which is kind of interesting that we're comparing these 3 and all 3 have been traded. But like, Albies, it just hasn't excited me that much. He had a 306 OBP with a 103 WRC plus in 2020. I mean, he was bad. He started batting out second in the lineup, and then they dropped him and basically swapped his spot with Dansby Swanson. He had a 4% walk rate, 24.2% K rate. He was way out of line with his averages. So if you're looking more towards his 2019, he had a 350 OBP. He was like roughly a 25-15 player, over 100 runs. So that's really solid, but he just hasn't shown that he's, taking this next step. And I wonder if he's just kind of the type of player he was in 2019, which was great. But, DJ LeMahieu was an MVP candidate. And, he had the 421 OBP. I mean, especially to a league like ours with the OBP, that's fantastic. And in 2019, he had a 100-100 season, 109 runs, 102 RBIs. Albies didn't even come anywhere close to that in the RBIs. He had 86. And I get that maybe he doesn't have the stolen base potential. I mean, he only had 5 stolen bases, but he more to makes up for it in these other categories. And then briefly on Whit, I like Whit. I just worry that the age is going to catch up at some point where we're going to see those stolen base numbers going down a bit. He's 32. His OBPs have been going down year by year, as have the walk rates. 367 in 2018 compared to 325 in 2020, an 8.6% walk rate that year compared to 4.5. Now, those numbers were kind of roughly in the middle in 2019. So while the speed is useful and the outfield eligibility is useful, it's just I think LeMahieu has the highest upside, and he's just I personally think he's the best player. If I had to rank him for this season, I think I go DJ 1, and then it's tough. I think I might go Witt 2 just because I trust him a little more than I do Albies, but it's close. And it's interesting because I think that a lot of the fantasy rankings have Albies 1, LeMahieu 2, Witt 3, and I think a lot of it's partially because they do more batting average rankings and OBP rankings. But I think for an OBP league, you might just have to go LeMahieu.
I think I can make a case for any of the three. Albies is, I guess, my favorite as a dynasty asset of the three, just because I'm a huge fan of him in general. And then even for now, the lineup he's in is incredible. So he's going to get a lot of runs and RBIs opportunities. But on the other hand, can a player really be impactful if they're on Andrew's team? He's not going to make much of a difference. He's a good guy to have and build around, but I wouldn't say he's going to impact the outcome of the season. And then you look at DJ LeMahieu. He's phenomenal. He's probably the best current second baseman in the league, I would say. So he's probably my pick right now. But I guess on the other hand, he's replacing the third guy on our list, Whit Merrifield. So it's not like a massive improvement. But the case for Whit Merrifield is that he is a massive improvement. Last season, Eric's starting second baseman was, at the end of the season, Robinson Cano. So having Whit Merrifield versus having Robinson Cano start at second base is a huge improvement. I think that's something that should be taken into account as well. So overall, I'd probably lean LeMahieu, but like I said, it's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I think you brought up some very good points. I think Albies is definitely the best dynasty asset, no question. He's 24, the others are 32. I think that Whit Merrifield is probably going to have the biggest impact for his team, because as big of an impact as I think LeMahieu will have for EVO, I mean, that offense is still stacked. Like, they got Goldschmidt, they got Rendon, they got Story, they got Turner, they got Betts, they have Osuna. I mean, the list goes on and on. So not that LeMahieu isn't huge, and especially for OBP, he's really going to help raise their OBP. But their offense is elite without him. Whereas Eric's offense would have a very big hole without Whit Merrifield. And now you may be like, oh, well, he's got Dylan Moore, but like, okay, like, fine. Like, congratulations. You have Dylan Moore. Anything else, or you want to move on to third base?
Yeah, let's move on to third base. Who are we going to be comparing?
Yeah, so this one's a fun one. Jose Ramirez and Manny Machado. Jose Ramirez is on Eric's team. He got him from Alex in the first trade of the offseason. And then Alex and Zach later replaced Jose Ramirez by getting Manny Machado. What are your thoughts here?
That's interesting for sure. I think Alex and Zach got the worst end of the third base upgrade. I would rather have Jose Ramirez than Manny Machado. I don't think it's that close, even though Machado was excellent this year. Jose Ramirez has been better overall the past 5 years, even if he did have a rough 2019. But either way, just in terms of impact, Alex is having a maybe slight downgrade at third base, whereas Eric, his old third baseman, at the end of last season, he is losing JD Davis, which hurts, but Gio Urshela is good, not great. I think Jose Ramirez is going to make a huge impact in Eric's lineup. He now has an elite bat on his team to kind of surround the guys that were a little iffy on. That helps tremendously.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think like the key distinction between Ramirez and Machado is the speed. Whereas I think they have similar OBPs. I know Machado wasn't great in 2019, but like Ramirez also wasn't great in 2019. In fact, you could argue Ramirez was a bit worse. And Ramirez in the half season, the second half of his 2018 wasn't so hot. And I'm admittedly not the biggest Jose Ramirez fan. I think a lot of other people like him better. He was someone I was interested in acquiring, but someone I was still a little hesitant on for that reason. Like he just had like 1.5 seasons that weren't so hot. But I think the speed really does it for me. I mean, Jose Ramirez in 2018 posted a 39-34 season, almost 40-40. Very few players in MLB history have posted 40-40 seasons. And even in 2019, in a down year, he had 23 homers and 24 stolen bases. He had almost an MVP-like season this year with 17 homers and 10 stolen bases in the shortened season. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's better. I'm not going to belabor the point too much because you got into it, but I do want to speak briefly about the impact this will have on Eric's team. I think one thing that Eric lacked from the first 2 seasons when he won the league was a couple of clear identifiable stars. So, like, for example, he had Jacob deGrom, he had Trevor Story, both of whom he traded away this past offseason. And there's no mistake that, he missed the playoffs because I feel like he was relying a lot on the waiver wire and maybe a little too much. I don't think anybody does a better job in the league than Eric of identifying good talents on the waiver wire. I feel like every time I want to pick someone up, he's on Eric's team, but that doesn't mean you don't need some established stars. So I think that Jose Ramirez is the big shining example of that established star that Eric has to really anchor his team. And I think you could argue, or I don't even know if it's an argument, that he's the best player in Eric's team. So, yeah, I think we're in agreement here. Jose Ramirez is the player.
Absolutely. So we'll be skipping shortstop since we already went in depth into Tatis versus Story, and there weren't any other great shortstops moved, unless you're a big Taylor Walls fan.
Well, I will say Alberto Mondesi was moved. We talked about him a lot on this podcast. I didn't think there was a good player to compare him to, but I don't really know what to think of Mondesi for next year. I mean, his speed's going to be there. If he can even keep his batting average remotely up, and if he can walk just a little more, he'll be a very, very good fantasy asset. But I'm still skeptical of that. And yeah, if you do want to talk or hear more about a shortstop debate, Tatis versus Story is on one of the earlier podcasts. And I think Zane makes a pretty decent pitch for why Story will be better than Tatis for this year. I personally think it's going to be the opposite. But check out that podcast if you want to hear that debate. We're not going to hash it out here again. So why don't we move to the outfield, Cam?
Yeah, we're going to do 2 different outfield comparisons. Is that right?
We are, yeah. And let's start with the first one here. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. versus Mike Yastrzemski. I personally have a strong opinion on this, but I want to hear what you think first, Cam.
Yeah, so which team were these guys being traded to and from?
Lourdes Gurriel went to Alex and Daniel in the trade that netted me Brandon Lau, who I immediately flipped for Kevin Biggio. And Mike Yastrzemski has been involved in several trades this offseason. I actually think BBO traded him to Eric on October 3rd, and 13 days later, on October 16th, they reacquired Yastrzemski. So I guess it is a trade, but technically he is back on the same team he was on this past season.
Yeah, so I think for that reason, I think we got to say Gurriel going to your team is the more impactful move.
Or from my team.
From your team to the Fighting Bellies is the more impactful move, since I guess Yastrzemski is kind of a net neutral. The Bellies do have a solid outfield already. They had going into the offseason, of course, Cody Bellinger, but also Mark Canha was really solid. And then Brandon Nimmo is good as well. But I think Gurriel is a guy that I'm decently high on. Maybe not as much as you are, but he's a good guy to have. And I think he's going to make a big impact on that team.
Yeah, I like Gurriel better than I like Yastrzemski. I'll talk about them briefly as players, as well as just the impact on the team. I think you're obviously right; they'll have a bigger impact for Daniel and Alex's team. But Yastrzemski, I mean, he got a lot of hype during the season. Everybody was like, "Oh, maybe he could be a dark horse candidate for the MVP." I mean, a 159 WRC plus is nothing to slouch at, and his walk rate almost doubled from 7.8% in 2019, where he already had a good season. He had a 120 WRC plus. Then it almost doubled to a 13.3% walk rate in 2020. But I think what holds me back is he had a 370 BABIP. I don't think that that's sustainable. And I don't think at the age of 30, having come up to the majors for the first time, at the age of 29, and he is all of a sudden, a 160 WRC plus hitter, or even anything remotely close to it. I think he's probably closer to the 120 he had in 2019. I buy that he did make some swing changes when Baltimore traded him to San Francisco, and I think that definitely helped. That's reflected in the minor league numbers in 2019 before they called him up as well. But he's not going to have a 160 WRC plus again. Whereas Lourdes Gurriel is kind of on the rise. I do have some concerns about him, and that was part of the reason that I traded him. I mean, for the record, I really love Lourdes Gurriel. I tried to reacquire him after I traded him away, so don't take this as me hating on him. But one of the things that kind of concerns me in this league format is his OBP. He had a 348 OBP this year, which was pretty solid, but it was buoyed by a 351 BABIP, which is just a little higher than he usually had. There wasn't really that much of a bump in the walk rate. He almost reminds me of maybe a little better version of Eddie Rosario, and you all know how much of a sweet spot I have for Eddie Rosario in my heart. But maybe a guy who's probably going to hit close to 30 homers with maybe an OBP around 325. Which is a solid player, one that needs to be starting in someone's outfield, but I don't think it's necessarily anything special. I think he's getting a little overhyped in some of these preseason columns by some of these fantasy writers, and maybe that's because, again, more average leagues and OBP leagues are writing for. He's going to hit for a really high average, but I think in our league with the OBP, it does lower his value a bit. So I think Lourdes is the better player. I think he's the one I'd rather have, and I think that he will have the bigger impact, especially with the depth on EBO's offense. They don't really need Yastrzemski, and I am a little skeptical of Yastrzemski keeping this up. So definitely Gurriel for me. But kudos to Yaz for really putting it together and taking off. I watched him for a while in the Orioles farm system, hoping he'd break out, and it's great to see him doing it in San Francisco.
Yeah, I'm less skeptical than you are about Yastrzemski, but I think Gurriel's the better player all around, and they're certainly fun to compare to each other.
Yeah, and Gurriel's definitely the better long-term fantasy asset. I mean, he's 3 years younger, 30 to 27. I think Gurriel actually has room to grow, whereas I think we've seen Yaz's peak. Want to do the next outfield comparison?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, Jordan Adams versus Jared Oliva. So this isn't our typical kind of who's going to have the better season. Jordan Adams is probably going to spend the entire season in the minors, whereas Jared Oliva should be on the Pirates roster for most of the season, if not even starting on opening day. But I'm curious, Cam, which player would you rather have?
So I would rather have Jordan Adams, and I don't think it's particularly close. Jared Oliva's never been much of a prospect. He kind of peaked at 40 plus future value on Fangraphs. He hit decently in the minors, but not like mind-blowingly well. He's never had a ton of power. He does have some stolen bases, but I don't really trust him to get on base that much. He batted 188 with no walks and no extra base hits in his brief cup of coffee in the majors.
Oh, that's 16 at bats. Come on, he can't derive anything from 16.
I know, but he was never. It's not enough to. He wasn't a prospect by the time he got called up, and he's still not a prospect. He might get some playing time in the terrible Pirates team, but I don't think he's really worth rostering or really gonna do anything. Whereas Jordan Adams has gotten some top 100 buzz. He and I talked about him quite a bit on last week's podcast, but I think it's a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jordan Adams probably has a higher upside. He has all the tools. I think the question is, can he put this together? There was a comparison I heard about him to when we did the 2010 kind of fake dynasty draft. We talked about Donovan Tate, the outfielder from Georgia, and if you recall, Cam, they're talking about how he had all the tools and he just couldn't put it together. And that's a little what concerns me about Jordan Adams. The tools are there, but the evidence, the jury's still out on whether or not he's going to put all those tools together. So, whereas Jared Oliva is kind of more like what you see at this point is what you're going to get. I have a little bit of a soft spot for players who just hit through the minors. They're not top prospects, and they can just hit, and they're able to carve out roles that way. And Trey Mancini is one of those guys for Baltimore, for example. And Jared Oliva, I mean, 354 OBP in 2018, 352 OBP in 2019 in Double-A. The thing that's really interesting to me is the stolen bases. He had 33 in 2018. He had 36 in 2019. And the 33 was in 108 games, the 36 in 123 games. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to play a full 162, but there's a player with 40 stolen base upside there. That's not something you see every day in fantasy, especially in this era, when power is more at a premium than ever and they're kind of devaluing speed. But stolen bases are nonetheless still a category. And I think you could argue it is the bigger might have a bigger impact on EBO than Jordan Adams will, just because EBO's really been looking for speed. And I know that they have another outfielder that they really like, Jarren Duran, who they got for that reason because he could provide a lot of speed. And, I wonder if maybe Oliva could have that same impact. Maybe he's just one of those guys who just, is not a top prospect, but he just figures out how to just hit in the majors and make a difference. So I still think you're probably right, but I wanted to make a pitch for Oliva here.
Yeah, I mean, if you want speed, Manny Margot's available. But, yeah, Oliva's the 19th ranked Pirates prospect, and he hit a little bit in the minors. He was good, not great. He does have some speed, but yeah.
That's fair. I guess I have a bit more of a soft spot for him than you do. But
yeah, that may be because at one point he was your second or third best prospect.
Yeah, my farm system's gotten a lot better since then, I like to think. But let's move on to what I think might arguably be the most interesting debate. Who would you rather have next season, Yordan Alvarez or Nelson Cruz at your util spot?
God, that's the one that I thought could have been the most interesting as well. Nelson Cruz was traded early in the offseason. He was traded to EBO to kind of fill that util spot. It was a crazy deal. Max Fried was involved, Zach Greinke, among others. Whereas Yordan Alvarez was kind of more under the radar, right? It was a big deal. Blake Snell was involved as well as Alex Verdugo, but he was traded to Clayton and Jake as one of their, I guess, several guys. I think Nelson Cruz is going to be more impactful. EBO, that was kind of one of their early moves to acquire a bat while trading away pitching. And he is 40 years old now, but he's an incredible hitter still somehow. I mean, we know how it's steroids, but whereas Yordan Alvarez didn't play in 2020 due to injuries, and who knows how well his legs are going to hold up. Is he going to start on opening day? Is he going to be ready?
Yeah, I think he'll be ready. I think they said that he's only going to DH this season, though. I mean, maybe there's like an outside chance it changes towards the end of the season, but I think he's going to DH for 162.
Yeah, I mean, that puts him on equal footing there with Cruz. But I think Alvarez has more upside in the sense that he's going to be playing for the next 15 years, whereas Cruz probably won't be playing 15 years from now. And I guess who knows if Alvarez will. Maybe he fades away. But for a single season, Cruz seems to somehow be getting better and better every year. I'd rather take him.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think I'd pick Cruz as well for this year. I mean, we're debating a 40-year-old versus a 23-year-old with two busted knees. I just think this is just such an interesting comparison. I will note that Jordan Alvarez has bounced around a couple times this offseason too. He was in that Chris Sale, Jesus Luzardo deal as well that EBO made early in the offseason with Andrew, and that's how they got him in the first place to trade him to Jake. I just think every year I'm like, Nelson Cruz is too old. This is going to be the year. But like, I just learned just not to doubt him. And until he falls off or shows some signs of decline, which he hasn't, I'm just not going to doubt him. And he'll be a top like 20 hitter this year. You know, I hated giving him up. I mean, he was on the Yellow Champs when they won their first championship, but you know, to get a long-term solid asset like Fried, it just felt like it was worth it. So definitely a tough decision. You know, I just, you know, Jordan, what he did in 2019 was fantastic. He was the AL Rookie of the Year. I don't want to diminish any of that, but like the injuries just concern me with those knees. I mean, he came back last year, played 2 games, and then he was done for the year. I just don't know if I can trust him. So I think Nelson Cruz is the safer pick. But boy, I mean, Jordan can hit, so it's going to be interesting. If he could stay healthy, he's going to be huge. And I'd like to take this time to remind you that you once traded Jordan Alvarez away for Blake Parker to me. So thank you for making that trade. Yeah.
I think it is worth mentioning that Jordan Alvarez was one of 3 DH types that Jake acquired this offseason. So the impact that each individual one will have is a little lessened. So that's certainly worth mentioning.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too. I also think that they're going to trade away at least one of them before the season starts or early in the season. And if not, I expect one of Soler or JD Martinez to eventually regain outfield eligibility. I think that a healthy Jordan starts over those two. I know that Jake and Clayton, or Jake at least is a Red Sox fan, so I'm sure JD is probably going to be in his lineup as often as he can as well. I do think Nelson Cruz might be a little more impactful for EBO just because, like, he could just flat out hit. And I think that just despite the age, he's going to be one of EBO's best hitters, just undoubtedly. I mean, again, I think they could have an elite lineup without him, but Cruz just makes it that much better.
All right. What's the next comparison?
Yeah, we're going to move on to starting pitching here. The first one we're going to do is Brandon Woodruff versus Jose Barrios. Now, this is a little bit interesting because if you all recall, last offseason, Eric traded me Brandon Woodruff among like 9 other pieces in one of the largest returns in league history. I think it was the most players/picks acquired by one team in a trade at that time. He got Gleyber Torres back. I had 11 starters then. Woodruff and Barrios were 2 of them. I really wanted to replace Torres with a bat. So I decided to trade Woodruff to Alex and Zach to get Meadows. They really wanted Barrios, but I insisted on giving them Woodruff. I eventually won out. And then this offseason, when I shipped off Barrios to EBO in the Tatis deal, I had a deal set up to get Barrios back. I had to leave my computer for a quick hour. Next thing I knew, he was going to ship him off to Connor for Bobby Witt. So I pivoted, and I got Brandon Woodruff back. So amazing how much like league history changes just because I couldn't be by my computer for an hour. But these two are kind of linked together forever in my mind. So a little bit of a backstory there. But yeah, which pitcher do you prefer, Cam?
That's certainly tough. I think they're both kind of equal on their own. Both are solid. I'd be happy to have either of them. I did once own Barrios. He was the first pitcher I ever drafted in the league after going the first several rounds without taking one. But I think
remember when I took Kevin Gausman over Jose Barrios?
I
Well,
do remember that.
yeah,
That was I thank you for that.
anytime, bud.
Yeah. Um, but I think I'd probably slightly rather have Woodruff, but in terms of impact on the league, I think Barrios is the definite winner here. Woodruff is just one of a dozen good starting pitchers that you have, whereas Barrios, that trade was a real signal to the league that Connor is trading for active major leaguers and that he's trying to win a little bit now. He's trying to acquire young major league. I wouldn't say he's a star, but he's a good starter. And I think that was one of the most impactful acquisitions in the entire offseason for any team. So I got to go with Barrios here.
Yeah, and I think that trade's going to be really interesting to look at in hindsight, like a couple of years from now, when you look at just how well Bobby Witt Jr. has been doing in spring training, and there's talks that he could crack the team. Is that Barrios for Witt Jr. Deal going to look good for Connor in the long run? I do think that Woodruff is the better pitcher. I think Woodruff has top 10 upside, and I've seen some rankings that already have him there. I think he's a top 15 dynasty pitcher. I think Barrios kind of is what he is at this point. He's a little bit inconsistent, but he's going to finish with like high 3s ERA. He's going to give you 200 innings. The strikeout rate is nowhere near Woodruff's, which I think also caps his value a bit. But like Barrios is just the ultimate like consistent starter. He's definitely a top 30 fantasy starter, and I'd argue he's more in that 20 to 25 range. But I think you're right about the signal that it sent to the league about what Connor was doing when he acquired him. I think Barrios is a great fit for that rotation with Giolito up there. I think he brings some stability. I think you and I have talked about before how Connor has a lot of very interesting young starting pitchers, both in the majors and in the minors. But there's a wide range of outcomes that could occur for those pitchers. So having somebody stable like Barrios really helps. I already have Cole, Flaherty, Nola, Fried, Gray, Hendricks, Carrasco, Urquidy, and the love of my life, Kyle Hendricks. So, if I didn't have Brandon Woodruff, I'd still have an elite rotation besides him. So I think you're dead on that. Barrios has the much bigger impact, and I don't think it's particularly close, even if Woodruff's a better player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say so. And yeah, we're going to do a second starting pitcher comparison, and this one is with two young guys who reached the majors for the first time this year. Tristan McKenzie, who was acquired by Connor this offseason, and Sixto Sanchez, who was acquired by Eric this offseason.
Oh man, this one's tough. I think this is probably the hardest one for me. I think this is even harder than Jordan and Cruz. Sixto got a lot of hype at the end of the season, and a lot of it warranted. But what he had a 3.46 ERA, 3.50 FIP. So the numbers or the peripherals largely support what he did. But what concerns me about Sixto is the strikeout rate. He had a 7.62 strikeout rate. That's not very good. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not elite by any means. The walk rate was decent at 254, but not exactly the level that you would think of a guy who's just low strikeout, but really, really good at control, kind of like a Kyle Hendricks type. Whereas Tristan McKenzie, and roughly the same number of innings, had a better ERA, although a little worse FIP to 391. But the strikeout rate's the big difference. He had 1134, so that's almost 4 strikeouts per 9 more than Sixto had. I know that McKenzie had some issues. I think the prospect shined ward off a little bit with some of the injuries he missed all of 2019. So this one's tough for me because it's not like Sixto didn't have injuries either. He missed a good chunk of his season. Hence, I actually drafted him, but then traded him away in that first season to get Cam's boy Gene Segura. I might take Tristan McKenzie just because of the strikeouts and because I trust Cleveland to develop pitchers. But it's close. I think you can make an argument either way, and I wouldn't argue with it. An hour from now, I might change my mind and say Sixto. What do you think, Cam?
Yeah, I agree that it's tight. I spoke to Tristan McKenzie earlier on the show during my offseason preview, saying that he was a guy that I would like to acquire, but I haven't reached out on him yet. I reached out on him a little. The price was a little high, so I didn't end up acquiring him, obviously. But I think I'd probably rather have Sixto this coming year, but it's close. Sixto, both were top prospects. Sixto had the higher ceiling always. Both kind of had a little shine wear off of them while they were in the minors, but they each were excellent in their debut campaign. McKenzie is striking more guys out, but I don't know. I think I trust Sixto Sanchez a little bit more.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think you can argue either way. I mean, I'm not going to argue at that point. When I first started talking, I thought I was going to say Sixto, and then looked at the numbers again, and then ended up saying McKenzie. So I don't know. This is a tough one, and this one will be really interesting to see play out. I think in terms of the impact, I think it might be a little more impactful for Eric's rotation, because Eric has a lot of these young guys that haven't really fully established themselves. I think Tyler Glasnow might be his best starter, and I think I explained earlier why Glasnow, just hasn't really fully proven himself despite what some people may think. So I think that adding Sixto to that bunch kind of really, gives Eric another piece to build that dominant young rotation. Whereas I think McKenzie's important to Connor, but he's got like 4 other young starting pitchers that are just kind of starting out who are kind of doing the same thing. And that rotation also has 2 anchors in Giolito and Barrios. So I think McKenzie's a little less necessary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. McKenzie's kind of fits the same mold as a lot of Connor's guys. But we got a couple fun comparisons to close out the segment. Which one are we doing first?
Let's do the prospect one first. As Bobby Witt Jr., who, as we mentioned, was acquired in the Barrios deal, versus Julio Rodriguez, who was in the Jose Ramirez deal.
Yeah, so that's a tricky one. I think prospect pedigree, I'd rather have Rodriguez. He's been a top 5 consensus prospect this year, pretty much across the board. Him and Kelenic are going to be insane as a duo in the outfield. Hopefully it is the Mariners after all, so we'll see. But on the other hand, Witt could be up on opening day. I don't think he will, and I don't think maybe he should, just because he hasn't played above high A, and he hasn't been facing exactly the best competition. But whereas Julio Rodriguez, it's looking like he won't be up for another year. So I think just in terms of impact, Bobby Witt Jr. is going to come up, and if he starts out hitting really well, then people are going to go crazy about him, and they're going to say, wow, EBO did incredibly well in this deal. Good for them. So I think that deal is going to kind of make the most waves around the league.
Yeah. If we're going based off prospect pedigree, I agree it's probably Julio Rodriguez. I think Bobby Witt, like you said, is very interesting for this season. Whether or not, even if he doesn't start the season with the team, if he comes up later and makes a big impact. I think for now, my answer is still Julio Rodriguez. I'm not going to let a couple of spring games really influence my decision, but man, Bobby Witt looks really good.
Yeah, he does. Was that all we had?
Yeah, I think that was every player. I enjoy doing this, and it'll be interesting to see if we are right on any of these predictions of who we think are going to be better. We'll definitely have to keep track of that as the season goes on. Of course, there are plenty of other players that have been traded this offseason as well, and we'll be keeping close eyes on them too. Definitely difficult to cut this down to 12. There are a lot of good candidates. So, anything else you want to add, Cam?
No, I'm just excited for the season to finally start. We're getting closer, just a couple weeks.
So close, yeah, like 2 more weeks. We'll get there. All right, thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
All right.